The moment I knew my career was over came exactly 43 minutes into the third quarter earnings call, when Victor, our vice president of operations, interrupted the chief financial officer mid-sentence to announce that my position was being eliminated due to what he called emotional instability and operational redundancy. Not in a private meeting, not in a respectful one-on-one conversation. On a live investor call with 273 participants, including our IPO underwriters, our external auditors, and every major institutional investor who'd committed to our upcoming $210 million public offering. Gee whiz. Let me set the scene properly, because context matters when you're about to watch someone's arrogance destroy everything they've built. I'm Catherine Hayes. For 6 years, I served as Director of Regulatory Compliance at Horizon Digital Solutions, a financial technology company that had somehow managed to grow from 12 employees in a converted warehouse to 370 personnel across 4 offices without anyone in leadership understanding what compliance actually meant. My job, the job I'd been doing meticulously for 6 years, was to ensure that every single system, process, contract, and operational procedure, the kind of regulations that don't care about your growth trajectory or your innovative disruption narrative, the kind that will shut you down, fine you into bankruptcy, and potentially send executives to federal prison if you ignore them. I didn't just do this. I built the entire compliance infrastructure from nothing. When I started, Horizon's idea of regulatory compliance was a single paragraph in the employee handbook that said follow all applicable laws. I created document retention policies. I implemented transaction monitoring systems. I established audit trails. I wrote the procedures that kept us from violating about 47 different federal statutes on a daily basis. And most importantly, I maintained the compliance certifications that were explicitly required for our IPO to proceed. But Victor, our vice president who'd been promoted 6 months earlier because he played tennis with the chief executive officer, had decided I was a problem. Not because I was bad at my job. Because I kept saying no. No. We can't process transactions that way. It violates the Bank Secrecy Act. No. We can't implement that feature without proper disclosure. It's securities fraud. No, we absolutely cannot tell investors we're fully compliant when we're still waiting on 3 critical certifications. Victor didn't like hearing no. Especially not from someone he'd apparently decided was too emotional and not a team player. The quarterly earnings call had started normally enough. Standard format. Chief Executive Officer opens with growth, metrics, and vision statement. Chief Financial Officer presents financial results. Various executives take turns highlighting departmental achievements. Then the investor question and answer session. I wasn't supposed to be on the call. Compliance directors don't usually participate in earnings calls. We're the people who review the scripts beforehand to make sure nobody accidentally commits securities fraud while trying to impress analysts. But that morning, Victor had sent me a calendar invite with a single line: "Your presence is required on today's earnings call." No explanation. No agenda. Just a directive. I should have known something was wrong. I dialed in at 1:58 p.m., muted my line, listened to the Chief Executive Officer, Marcus Whitfield, deliver his prepared remarks about revolutionary fintech innovation and unprecedented growth trajectories. Listened to the Chief Financial Officer, Sarah Chen, present quarterly results that were technically accurate but carefully worded to hide the fact that our profit margins were being compressed by the massive compliance infrastructure costs. My costs. The infrastructure I'd built to keep us legal. Then came the question and answer session. Standard questions from analysts. Market penetration. Customer acquisition costs. Competition analysis. Marcus handled them smoothly. He'd been practicing this performance for months. Then an analyst from Westbridge Capital, one of our largest prospective IPO investors, asked the question I'd been dreading. Can you provide an update on your regulatory compliance status? Your S1 filing indicates you're still awaiting certain certifications. What's the timeline? Sarah started to answer. She was reading from the script I'd prepared. Carefully worded. Technically accurate. Appropriately cautious. And then Victor's voice cut through. Loud. Confident. Catastrophically wrong. Let me address that directly. I'm Victor Chen, VP of Operations. We are fully compliant across all regulatory requirements. Any outstanding certifications are purely administrative formalities that don't impact our operational capabilities or IPO readiness. In fact, we've recently streamlined our compliance operations to eliminate redundancy and emotional decision-making that was creating unnecessary delays. I unmuted, professionally, calmly. Victor, that's not accurate. We're still awaiting final certification on 3 critical items that are explicitly required for. He cut me off. Catherine, I appreciate your perspective, but I think leadership is better positioned to address strategic questions. This isn't strategic, Victor. This is regulatory fact. We cannot represent to investors that we're fully compliant when we're objectively not. That's securities fraud. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when 273 people simultaneously realize they're witnessing something catastrophic. Then Victor laughed. Actually laughed. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Catherine, you're demonstrating the kind of emotional overload that's been impacting your judgment. This is an investor call, not a therapy session. More silence. Someone coughed. I heard keyboard typing. Probably analysts taking notes for their downgrade reports. Marcus jumped in, voice tight. Victor, perhaps we should take this offline. No, Marcus, this is exactly the right forum. Our investors deserve to understand how we're optimizing operations. Effective immediately, Catherine Hayes's position is being eliminated. We're restructuring compliance under a more collaborative framework that won't impede our growth trajectory. He just fired me. On a live call. With our auditors listening. With our IPO underwriters listening. With the Securities and Exchange Commission probably listening because they monitor these calls. I should have been angry. Should have been devastated. Should have felt something other than the cold crystalline clarity that settled over me like fresh snow. Victor, I said, voice perfectly calm. I want to make sure I understand. You're terminating my employment, effective immediately, during a public investor call, correct? We appreciate your contributions, but it's time for Horizon to move forward with leadership that understands growth requires calculated risk-taking. Understood. In that case, I'm formally resigning, effective immediately, and I'm emailing my final compliance report to the executive team, the board, and our external auditors right now. Wind. Please open the attachment labeled Final Compliance Status Summary. I believe everyone on this call should review it carefully. I heard scrambling, multiple people unmuting. Catherine, that's not. Victor started. But I had already hung up. Muted my phone. Opened my laptop. And sent the email I prepared 3 weeks ago when I first realized Victor was trying to force me out. The email had 7 recipients. Marcus Whitfield, Chief Executive Officer. Sarah Chen, Chief Financial Officer. Auditor. Victor Chen, Vice President of Operations. The 4 board members. And David Morrison, Managing Partner at Thornton & Associates, our external audit firm who happened to be on the earnings call. The subject line, Final Compliance Status and Certification Authority Transfer. The body was professionally brief. Per my resignation effective immediately, please find attached a comprehensive summary of all outstanding compliance items, regulatory certifications, and authorized signatory documentation. Please note that several critical certifications are issued specifically to named individuals and require formal transfer procedures before authority can be delegated. Timeline for transfer is typically 60-90 days pending regulatory review. Best regards, Catherine Hayes. The attachment was 47 pages. I'd been updating it daily for 3 weeks. It documented every single compliance gap, every outstanding certification, every regulatory requirement that Horizon was still working to meet. But the critical section, the section I'd highlighted in yellow and marked urgent, IPO blocking issues, detailed something Victor apparently didn't understand. Financial technology companies operating in our space require specific individual certifications. Not corporate certifications, individual ones. Issued to named compliance officers who've passed examinations, undergone background checks, and been explicitly approved by federal regulators. I held 6 such certifications. Personally. In my name. Certifications that explicitly authorized me, Catherine Hayes, to serve as the designated compliance officer for various aspects of Horizon's operations. certifications that are IPO disclosure documents listed as critical requirements, certifications that would take 60 to 90 days to transfer to a replacement. If we could find a qualified replacement, if that replacement could pass the examinations, if the regulators approved the transfer. Victor had just fired the only person whose individual certifications were keeping Horizon legally operational and IPO eligible. On a recorded call in front of our auditors. My phone started ringing 30 seconds after I sent the email. Marcus. I declined. Victor. Declined. Sarah. Declined. Board member. Declined. I silenced my phone, made tea, sat on my couch, and waited. The first email arrived 8 minutes later. From David Morrison, our external auditor. Subject: urgent, compliance certification status. Catherine, I've reviewed your final report. Can you confirm that your individual certifications are non-transferable without formal regulatory approval, and that this process typically requires 60-90 days? Please call me immediately. David. I didn't respond. The second email came 4 minutes after that. From Margaret Whitfield, board chair, and Marcus's mother. Subject: please call immediately, misunderstanding. Catherine, I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. Victor acted without board approval. We'd like to discuss your continued employment immediately. Please call my personal number. I didn't respond. The third email was from Sarah Chen. Subject: final compliance status, urgent clarification needed. Catherine, I'm reading your report. Are you saying we cannot proceed with the IPO without your personal certifications? Or that we need 60-90 days to transfer them? Please clarify urgently. The underwriters are asking questions I can't answer. I responded to that one, briefly, professionally. Sarah, both statements are accurate. Horizon cannot legally operate certain functions without designated certified compliance officers. I was that officer. Transfer requires regulatory approval, which typically takes 60-90 days. Horizon can certainly find a replacement, but until that replacement is certified and approved, certain operations should be suspended, and the IPO cannot proceed without material disclosure changes. Best, Catherine. I hit send. Made more tea. Checked my personal email. I had 3 messages from recruiters who'd somehow already heard I'd left Horizon. Word travels fast in specialized industries. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered this time. Catherine Hayes. Miss Hayes, this is Jonathan Westbrook from Whitmore Securities. We're the lead underwriter for Horizon's IPO. I was on the earnings call. I need to understand the situation with your certifications. Mr. Westbrook, I've provided a comprehensive report to Horizon's executive team and board. I'd recommend discussing this with them directly. I've tried. They're claiming this is a minor administrative issue that won't impact the IPO timeline. Mr. Westbrook, I've documented everything thoroughly. My certifications are listed in Horizon's S1 filing as critical compliance requirements. Without those certifications, or approved replacements, Horizon cannot legally operate several core functions. Whether that impacts your IPO timeline is between you and Horizon's management. Silence. Then, Miss Hayes, were you terminated or did you resign? Both. I was terminated on the earnings call by Victor Chen. I then formally resigned and provided appropriate transition documentation on the earnings call in front of investors and auditors. Correct. Jesus Christ. He hung up. I finished my tea, opened my laptop, updated my professional networking profile, regulatory compliance director. Financial services, available for consulting, specialized in individual certification management. Within 20 minutes, I had 11 connection requests. Within an hour, 4 direct messages from companies asking about consulting availability. By 5 p.m., my phone had 37 missed calls from Horizon numbers. By 6 p.m., I had a formal letter delivered to my apartment by courier. From Thornton and Associates, our external auditors. The letter was professionally devastating. Dear Horizon Digital Solutions Executive Team and Board of Directors, after reviewing the compliance documentation provided by former Director of Regulatory Compliance Catherine Hayes, we must 4-4 Mally notify you of several material concerns regarding the company's regulatory status and IPO readiness. Our review indicates that multiple critical compliance certifications are held individually by Ms. Hayes and cannot be immediately transferred following her departure. Federal regulations require that these certifications be held by named individuals who have been specifically approved by relevant regulatory agencies. The transfer process typically requires 60-90 days and is subject to regulatory approval. Until replacement certifications are obtained, Horizon Digital Solutions may not be in compliance with certain regulatory requirements. More critically, the company's S-1 filing represents that all material compliance requirements have been met or are on track for completion. Hayes's departure and the timeline for certification, replacement, constitute a material change that must be disclosed to prospective investors. We recommend immediate consultation with Securities Counsel regarding disclosure obligations. Additionally, we must express serious concern regarding the circumstances of Ms. Hayes' departure. Her termination on a public earnings call, followed by immediate revelation of material compliance issues, raises significant questions about management's understanding of regulatory requirements and internal controls. We will be conducting an expanded review of Horizon's compliance status and governance procedures. We will contact you tomorrow to discuss next steps. Sincerely, David Morrison, Managing Partner, Thornton and Associates. I read that letter 3 times when Marcus forwarded it to me at 6:47 p.m. with the subject line, "Please call me immediately. We need to fix this." I didn't call. Instead, I opened a new document and started writing something I'd been composing in my head for 3 weeks. A comprehensive guide to regulatory compliance for financial technology companies. The kind of guide that would help startups understand exactly what they were getting into before they ignored their compliance director's advice. I was 2,000 words in when my doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. Marcus Whitfield, standing in my hallway looking like he'd aged 5 years in 4 hours. I opened the door. Didn't invite him in. "Catherine, please. We need to talk." "I don't work for you anymore, Marcus. You don't get to show up at my home and demand conversations." I know. And I'm sorry." Victor acted without authorization. "The board never approved your termination. We want you back." "You want me back now that you've realized I wasn't being emotional or obstructionist. I was being accurate." He looked at the floor. "Yes? Marcus, I spent 6 years building compliance infrastructure while you and Victor treated me like an obstacle to growth. I documented every single instance where I raised concerns and was overruled. Every time I said no to something illegal and was called not a team player. Every time I warned about regulatory consequences and was told I was being overly cautious. I understand. You don't. You fired me on a public call because I told the truth about your compliance status. In front of investors. In front of auditors. That wasn't Victor going rogue. That was your company culture crystallized into one catastrophic moment." "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to actually read my report. Every page. And then I want you to explain to your board and your investors why you didn't listen to any of this before terminating your compliance director on a recorded call. The IPO is not my problem anymore. You have 60 to 90 days to find someone qualified to replace me. Someone who can pass the certification examinations. Someone who can get regulatory approval. Someone who's willing to work for a company that publicly fires compliance directors for doing their job. Good luck with that search." I closed the door, went back to my laptop, continued writing. The next morning I woke up to 83 unread emails. Most from Horizon. Several from recruiters. 3 from journalists who'd apparently heard about the earnings call incident. And 1 from someone I didn't expect. Subject: consulting opportunity, urgent needs assessment. Sender: Margaret Whitfield, board chair. I opened it. "Catherine, I'm writing personally, not as board chair. Victor has been placed on administrative leave. The board had no knowledge of his plans to terminate you on the earnings call. We've reviewed your comprehensive report and now understand the severity of the situation. We cannot compel you to return as an employee. but we would like to engage you as an independent consultant to assist with the certification transfer process and help us find your qualified replacement. Your rate is yours to name. The alternative is an IPO delay of at least 90 days, potential SEC investigation regarding our disclosure practices, and possible regulatory action. I understand if you decline. We failed you. But if you're willing to help us fix this, we're listening now. Margaret. I read it twice. Made coffee. Thought about 6 years of being dismissed, ignored, and treated like an impediment to success. Thought about Victor's laugh when he called me emotionally unstable. Thought about being fired on a public call. Then I thought about my mortgage. About the 3 job offers I'd already received. About the consulting practice I could build. About my actual market value. I responded, Margaret, I'm willing to discuss a consulting arrangement under the following terms. 1. $500 per hour with a 40-hour minimum weekly retainer for the duration of the certification transfer process. 2. Direct reporting to the board, not to executive management. 3. Full authority to suspend any operations that are not in regulatory compliance, with no override. 4. Public acknowledgement that my termination was an error, and that I left in good standing. 5. A formal written apology from Victor Chen delivered privately to me, not for public consumption. Just acknowledgement. If these terms are acceptable, I can begin Monday. If not, I understand and wish you success in finding alternative solutions. Best, Catherine. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. $500 per hour was more than triple my previous salary when calculated hourly. A 40-hour weekly retainer meant $200,000 monthly. I expected negotiation. I expected pushback. I got a response in 14 minutes. Terms accepted. Board meeting this afternoon to approve, formally. Can you start tomorrow? Margaret. I stared at the email. Called my best friend, Jennifer, who'd been texting me concerned messages since yesterday. Jen, they just agreed to pay me $500,000 per month. To do what? The same job they fired me for. Except now I report to the board and I can actually enforce rules. She laughed. Catherine, please tell me you're going to make them suffer. I'm going to make them compliant. Which, given their current leadership, will feel like suffering. I drafted a response. Margaret, I can start tomorrow. I'll need a formal consulting agreement drafted by your legal counsel, reviewed by my attorney before signing. Also, I'll need Victor's apology delivered before I begin work. Not negotiable. Catherine. Response in 7 minutes. Agreement will be ready by end of day. Victor's apology will be delivered this evening. He's not happy, but he's also not employed here anymore. Board terminated him an hour ago. Thank you, Catherine. Margaret. Victor was gone. I'd been fired yesterday. He'd been fired today. The universe occasionally delivers perfect timing. That evening, my doorbell rang again. Courier. Envelope from Horizon Digital Solutions. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. Catherine, I made a significant error in judgment. My actions on the earnings call were unprofessional, inappropriate, and failed to recognize your expertise and contributions. I apologize sincerely for how I treated you and for the circumstances of your departure. You were right about the compliance issues. I should have listened. Victor Chen. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't particularly heartfelt. But it was an acknowledgement. I filed it away. The consulting agreement arrived at 9:00 p.m. 23 pages. I forwarded it to my attorney. She called me 30 minutes later. Catherine, this is the most favorable consulting agreement I've ever reviewed. They're giving you complete authority. Are you sure you want this? It's going to be brutal. They created this situation. I'm just going to document the cleanup. All right. I have a few minor modifications, but nothing substantial. You can sign this. I signed the next morning. Started work at 8:00 a.m. My first action as an independent consultant was to request a complete audit of every single operational process Victor had implemented in the past 6 months. By noon, I'd identified 14 separate regulatory violations. By end of day, I'd suspended 3 entire product lines that were operating without proper compliance oversight. By the end of the first week, I'd documented so many issues that the board held an emergency meeting to discuss whether they should delay the IPO by 6 months instead of 90 days. I attended that meeting via video conference. Board members, here's the situation clearly. Victor spent 6 months systematically dismantling or ignoring every compliance control I'd implemented. He did this because he believed regulatory caution was impeding growth. He was wrong. You now have 2 choices. Option 1. Delay the IPO by 6 months. Use that time to rebuild compliance infrastructure properly, hire a qualified replacement for me, get all certifications transferred and approved, and go public with a solid regulatory foundation. Option 2. Rush forward. Try to patch the worst violations. Hope the SEC doesn't notice the others. And risk not just IPO failure, but potential regulatory action, fines, and personal liability for board members who approved an IPO they knew had material compliance issues. Margaret looked at the other board members. Catherine, option 1. But we need you to stay on as consultant through the entire process. I can do that. At the agreed rate. Agreed. The IPO delay was announced 3 days later. The press release was carefully worded. Horizon Digital Solutions announces strategic delay of public offering to strengthen regulatory infrastructure and enhance compliance capabilities following leadership transitions. Translation: We hired our compliance director, immediately realized we couldn't operate without her. And now we're paying her consulting fees that exceed her annual salary every month while we fix the disaster we created. The financial press had a field day. Articles about the dangers of growth at all costs culture. Think pieces about the importance of compliance infrastructure. One particularly brutal analysis titled, How Horizon Digital Solutions Learned That Regulatory Compliance Isn't Optional. Victor's name appeared in several articles. Mine didn't. I preferred it that way. Over the next 6 months, I rebuilt what Victor had destroyed. Hired my own replacement, a brilliant former SEC attorney named Patricia, who actually understood that compliance enables growth rather than impeding it. Trained her personally. Transferred every certification with full regulatory approval. And documented everything so thoroughly that Horizon's IPO disclosure became a model for regulatory transparency. The company finally went public 8 months after that catastrophic earnings call. The IPO raised $218 million. $8 million more than originally projected. Because investors appreciated the compliance infrastructure. I watched the opening bell ceremony from my new office. I'd started my own consulting firm. Regulatory compliance for financial technology companies. I had 7 clients. All of them competitors of Horizon who'd heard about my story and wanted someone who actually understood how to balance growth with compliance. Patricia called me that afternoon. Catherine, Marcus wants to know if you'll come to the celebration dinner tonight. Tell Marcus I'm busy. But congratulations to the team. He also wanted me to tell you that he finally read your entire report. Every page. He said he's sorry he didn't read it 6 years ago. Patricia, make sure he reads your reports. All of them. Every page. Before someone else gets fired on an earnings call. She laughed. Trust me, things are different now. Also, your name came up in the board meeting yesterday. They're considering creating an advisory board seat for regulatory expertise. They want to offer it to you. Not interested. But thank you. Can I ask why? Because I don't work for people who only listen after everything explodes. I work for people who listen the first time. I hung up. Opened my laptop. I had 4 new client inquiries. 3 speaking invitations. And a message from a journalist working on a book about corporate governance failures. I responded to the clients. Accepted 1 speaking invitation. Declined the journalist politely. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about something simpler. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what you're supposed to do. Document it thoroughly, and let the consequences unfold naturally. Victor thought compliance was an obstacle. He learned it was a foundation. Marcus thought I was expendable. He learned some people are infrastructure. The board thought they could fix it all quickly. They learned that rebuilding trust takes longer than destroying it. And me? I learned that being fired on a public call is humiliating right up until the moment everyone realizes you were right all along. Then it becomes your credentials. My name is Catherine Hayes. They fired me on a live investor call for telling the truth about regulatory compliance. So I documented everything, triggered an IPO delay, and built a consulting practice that now advises their competitors. Thanks for watching, corporate survivors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old VP, then you're probably still Googling what is a compliance certification and wondering why growth requires foundations. Good luck with that.